The sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system is much more complicated than the parasympathetic. So I would suggest that you stop watching this right now and go and look at the parasympathetic nervous system video first. Sympathetic is the fight or flight system that mobilizes when needed. All of the preganglionic fibers arise from the thoracic and the lumbar regions of your spinal cord. And this is what gives the sympathetic nervous system its alternate name as the thoracolumbar system. This system is so much more complex because it has cholinergic and adrenergic neurons. So it has neurons that release acetylcholine and neurons that release norepinephrine. However, just like the parasympathetic nervous system, all of the preganglionic fibers are cholinergic. All of them. It's the postganglionic fibers that have the option of secreting ACH or norepinephrine. That's not it. Also complicating the sympathetic nervous division is structures called the sympathetic chain ganglia. And this was that collection of unmyelinated neurons and synapse areas that run lateral to the spinal cord. And so I have this sympathetic chain ganglia right here. But you are aware that there is also one on the left side. Don't be fooled by these diagrams. The sympathetic chain ganglia is on both sides. Because the sympathetic nervous system is more complicated, there is also more complicated anatomy that goes along with it. And this is anatomy that we did not cover in the spinal cord section or the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic chain ganglia is connected to the ventral ramus. And here's our sympathetic chain ganglia, and here is our ventral ramus of each spinal nerve. Spinal nerve. So sympathetic chain ganglia are connected to the ventral ramus of each spinal nerve. And it's connected by these two structures that are called the communication rami. Rami is plural and ramus is a singular term. Every ventral ramus at every level emerging from a spinal nerve has these two communication rami. There is a white communication ramus that is carrying a myelinated neuron. There is a gray communication ramus that is carrying, of course, an unmyelinated neuron. Recall that preganglionic fibers of both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic were myelinated neurons. So, therefore, this white communication ramus is the pathway for the preganglionic neuron. And let's put a cell body up here in the lateral horn. Now, this preganglionic neuron will then synapse with the postganglionic neuron, which will then leave the sympathetic chain ganglia through the gray communication ramus and then leave the ventral ramus at that level, another level, or even something stranger called a splanchnic nerve. So I just want to point out that using these communication rami, it's just like a little detour, right? So instead of coming completely out the ventral ramus, which is what we're used to seeing with the spinal skeletal muscle, what's happening is we're coming out the ventral ramus and then just taking a little detour where the synapse of the preganglionic and postganglionic neurons would meet up. The first pathway that a preganglionic fiber of the sympathetic nervous system could take in order to leave the spinal cord is called the spinal nerve route. And this is the route that we previously described, where the synapse area between the preganglionic and postganglionic fibers is in the sympathetic chain ganglia. So we have a preganglionic neuron leaving and then synapsing with a postganglionic neuron right there. The preganglionic fiber, it leaves the spinal cord, goes through the ventral root, spinal nerve, ventral ramus, and then it uses the two rami communicans to synapse with the postganglionic fiber, which then leaves the spinal cord and goes all the way to the target organ that it's meant to control. The second location where the preganglionic and postganglionic fibers can synapse is using the sympathetic chain ganglia, but it's synapsing with the synapses occurring at a different level than the one in which it leaves the spinal cord. And this is pictured right here. This is the second way, and it's giving you the idea that this preganglionic neuron leaves, but then it can synapse at a higher or lower level. Let's try to draw this. Try. The preganglionic fiber originating in the lateral horn leaves the spinal cord by way of the ventral root, the spinal nerve, and then it enters the sympathetic chain ganglia by way of that white communication ramus. However, instead of synapsing with the postganglionic fiber right here, the preganglionic fiber is going to extend upward. It can go downward too, but I'm just going to extend it upward as well. When the preganglionic fiber reaches the level at which they want the output, then that's when the synapse with the postganglionic fiber occurs. And this postganglionic fiber will leave the sympathetic chain ganglia by way of the gray communicans and then travel all the way out to the output or target organ, which is going to be cardiac, smooth muscle, or a gland. So this is very similar to the spinal nerve route. But instead of using the first ganglia we encounter in the sympathetic chain ganglia, we're going to then go upward or downward to other levels, synapsing there. And the third way, called the splanchnic nerve route, is when a preganglionic fiber synapses with a postganglionic fiber using a collateral ganglia. And that's what we have here. This is a synapse area that is not in the sympathetic chain ganglia. It is much further out. Remember that collateral ganglia were these bunches of unmyelinated cell bodies and axon terminals that were located further out in the abdomen or pelvic cavities. There were 3 collateral ganglia to the parasympathetic nervous system, but I mean, of course, there are many more to the sympathetic nervous system. The preganglionic fiber, it originates in the lateral horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord, and it leaves by way of the ventral root, spinal nerve, and then it travels through the spinal nerve and bypasses the white and gray communication rami. And then it travels further out to the target organ. It travels further out to a collateral ganglion. Then the nerve that leaves the spinal cord travels to the collateral ganglia, and these are the nerves that are called the splanchnic nerves. And this is why this is called the splanchnic pathway. Because I'm just going to draw a big arrow, because this is a splanchnic nerve. When the myelinated preganglionic fiber reaches the collateral ganglia, it synapses with an unmyelinated postganglionic fiber. And then That's when the postganglionic fiber travels all the way to the target organ and it releases acetylcholine or epinephrine. Remember that when a preganglionic fiber synapses with a postganglionic fiber, anywhere, if a pre and post are synapsing, ACH, acetylcholine, will be released to excite that postganglionic fiber. But here in the sympathetic nervous system, these postganglionic fibers are capable of releasing acetylcholine or epinephrine.